This video, we are looking at gaps. So we're going to talk about gaps. And what is a gap? So when we talk about a stock has a gap to fill, we are looking at the S&P 500, which is the SPY on the one. We're looking at the daily chart. Always remember that. To look for gaps, we're going to look at the daily chart. But do you see how on 11/1, the high of this candle was 423.50, and the next day it gapped up to the low of this candle is 426.56. So from this candle here to this candle here, there is a gap that must be filled or needs to be filled in order to, to close this gaps. And most stocks comes back to fill their gaps. So what I like to do is I mark the low of the candle, which is here, and the high of this candle, which is here. And once I do that, I'll go in and put an alert. So if, considering that the SPY is moving up, it looks like it's going to get rejected here at the 430.41, which is the 50-day EMA. This is looking at the daily chart. It could very well break through that place if Apple reports good earnings, or if we get a new news catalyst, or the way that it's been trending today, it could very well break through that. So if it does, it could possibly go up to this ATR trailing stop, which is at the 433.06, and get rejected here. However, the SPY has a gap in this area that needs to be filled, and I believe it's going to come back and fill that gap, right? So what I would do is put this in a watch list, and I will create an alert to let me know that once the SPY gets to this place, which is getting rejected somewhere around here, comes back to this area right here, I would definitely look to trade it to the downside, because there is a gap that must be filled. And again, most stocks comes back to fill those gaps. And if we look at Apple today, Apple did the exact same thing. The market just ran up this morning, so there was a lot of places that has gaps that need to be filled. The low of this on yesterday, the high of this candle was 174.23. So I'm going to mark that here. And the low, I'm going to go and change this so that it will be directly on my number, and I know it will be right. Okay, so the low of this candle here is 175.46. So I'm going to click here, and that tells me that Apple has a gap to fill from this place to this place. It closed, the high of this candle is here. It gapped up to this place right here. So I'm going to put an alert right here to let me know that Apple, once it gets to that place, it could possibly come back down and fill that gap. And as you can see, Apple has a few gaps that need to be filled. Normally when I have these white dotted lines here, that tells me that there's a gap that needs to be filled. So Apple may report good earnings. They do report today. They could very well report really good earnings and just keep going up. The resistance that I see on the daily chart is at the 180.12, which is the ATR trailing stop. So Apple could report good, come up and fill this gap, because there is another gap that needs to be filled. But I just wanted you to be mindful that most stocks fill their gaps. I need to be mindful of that. Put that in your watch list, put that in your chart, and set your alerts as I have done, so that you're not having to constantly watch them, right? All you have to do is set your alert to let your alerts know that, so it can let you know that it has a gap that needs to be filled. Tesla has several gaps that need to be filled, and it looks like Tesla has filled a gap today. Today's the second. Yes, I had this marked from 8:18 to 8:21. It looks like Tesla is coming up here to fill a gap, and it did. However, I see some other places that Tesla could possibly run up to, but guess what? It created another gap right here. The high of this candle is 205.99. So I'm going to mark that. And the low of this candle is 211.45. Get rid of this one. 211.45, which is here. See how it automatically put the amount on there for me instead of me trying to, let me say that, me trying to get exactly on it. When I went and changed it here, it did that for me. So I don't know if I explained that, but that's exactly what I did. That OHLC, it just puts it directly on that candle so that I'll have the exact price, right? So now that I see that Tesla has a gap that needs to be filled, I've already created my alert to let me know that even though the gap starts at 211.45, if Tesla gets down to 210.66, my computer is going to send me an alert to let me know that Tesla is possibly going to come down to fill that gap. But I want to zoom out just a little bit to show you how many times Tesla normally it comes back to fill the gap. Do you see? I've had it marked from 9/11 here, and look, Tesla came back and the candles show that the gap was filled. And that has happened so many times that most stocks fill their gaps, and the main thing is to know where your gaps are, and we find that by looking at the daily chart. We look at the previous candle, the previous day's close or previous day candle, and then we look at the next day open candle, and that creates the gap up. And not all gaps are up, let me say that. Sometimes it will gap down, creating the gap. Your concern is where is the gap and where you're going to get in and how you're going to trade it. That's the main thing, knowing where it is and how you're going to trade it. Set your alerts. That's going to remind you and keep you, okay, you're not going to be able to watch them every single day like that. That's why we create the alerts. But gap fills are very, very important. Again, we've looked at Tesla and the SPY and Apple, and we know that all three of those have gaps that need to be filled. This is the S&P 500. Gap needs to be filled. It's going to come back at some point to fill this gap. As soon as that alert comes in, I'm going to be looking to trade it to the downside to fill that gap. Tesla, it has a downside gap. Soon as my alert goes off, I'm going to be watching it to go and try to make money on the way down to fill that gap. Apple is the exact same way. I'm going to watch it. Once that alert goes, I'm going to listen for my alert to go off. And once it does, I'm going to look to trade Apple to the downside. I'm just showing you another way that you can, another strategy, let's say that you can go in and make money. And that's just trading gap fills, because most of the time, I'm going to say it again, most of the time, most stocks come back to fill those gaps. And I look forward to that, because I remember Netflix, it reported earnings. I'm going to go to Netflix chart. This is Netflix. It reported earnings, right? Netflix is all the way down here. And look how far of a gap that it has created. From the high of this candle is 354.79. So from right here all the way up to the low of this candle is 392.26. That's a big gap that Netflix is going to possibly come back to fill. Now, when, we don't know. So I have alerts set right here to let me know that Netflix has a gap that needs to be filled. And as soon as those alerts go off, I'm going to be looking to trade Netflix to the downside. But I do see a very big gap that needs to be filled with Netflix. And again, most stocks fill their gaps, y'all. I hope this is very, very helpful. Remember to look at your daily chart. Look at the candle, the day candle that previously closed. Let's say that. And then look at the daily the day that the candle opened the next day. So we're looking at the previous day and the next day, and we're going to see, is there a gap in between? If it is, mark your levels, set your alerts, and trade what you see. I can't say that enough. Trade what you see, y'all. I hope this is very, very helpful for you. Remember, y'all, we're going to get it one trade at a time, one section at a time. We just putting the puzzle together. We're going to get it. Stay focused, be encouraged, and you know what? Be blessed, y'all, as well as a blessing unto others.